There we go.
Oh, sorry, it glitched.
After you.
Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm Shani. I with SavedByaSpell. Most of my videos that I'm kind of more known for is more witchy stuff and witchcraft related things. But most of what I do is more education related around witchcraft. That's my passion. That's mostly what I try to strive to do, and try to have fun with it. Because the only way to kind of dispel the fears and all that kind of stuff is to show that we're real people and it's not super serious, and yeah, try to have fun with it.
Well, I have kindly been joined by Saved by a Spell. This month's topic is paranormal activity and supernatural experiences and afterlife. I have a few questions written down, and I thought we could ask a few questions and learn a bit more about what you do, if that's okay. So the first question is, when did you start off? How did you start off?
So I was around 13-ish, and it was a bit of a long process to figure out exactly what was going on. And I was getting a lot of like panic attacks during that time, and so seeing doctors and prescribed meds and whatever, and my mom really couldn't figure it out. Doctors weren't really sure, all that kind of stuff. And it was actually my dad who kind of went, yeah, I think she's seeing spirits, because he sees spirits. And he's like, I think that's what's going on. So when he's like, I think this is what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And so once I kind of realized what it was and then learned how to control it, then the panic attacks, anxiety, all that kind of stuff went away, because it really wasn't anxiety attacks. It just was, spirits and things like that were trying to contact me. I didn't know how to control those feelings. So seeing a doctor, that's what they kind of labeled it as, which I find is very common for a lot of people. It's a pretty common thread of anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and then when they actually realize what it is and can control it, then they go, yeah, I didn't have to take my meds anymore and all that kind of stuff. So that seems like a pretty common theme. So yeah, that was around 13. So all through my teen years, I kind of rejected it. So I just completely blocked it out, didn't bother, all that kind of stuff. And then in my kind of early 20s is when I really started to see it for what it actually was. It wasn't this like burden to ignore and shut out and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times too, people, when they do that, they start rejecting it. The like spirit and stuff just tries harder. So it gets harder to control. And eventually you just have to kind of give up. Eventually you just kind of have to give up and go, okay, this is my life, this is the game, and then kind of go from there and develop your skills and all that kind of stuff from there.
So when was your first, have you ever had a paranormal experience?
So my very first one, and this actually goes back to when I was a teenager and I was kind of rejecting it. And I knew it was a spirit, but I still kind of ignored it. So this was my first one. In my bedroom, I had a dish that was like next to my bed, and it had like just random stuff, right? Whatever. But this dish, it had stuff that I used all the time, like, lip chap and whatever. So it's something I used a lot. And all the time, this dish would be moved to the corner of my dresser, and like the specific corner, that exact same spot, all the time. And it went to like, I would go to grab something. It's like, where's my dish? I knew exactly where it was. It was at the corner. And this entity was trying to contact me, like trying to get me to pay attention. And that went on for a long time because I ignored, like I knew what it was, but I'm like, I'm not dealing with you. I don't want to do it. So yeah, that dish moved countless times for a few years until I actually moved out of my parents' house, actually. So that was my kind of like first one. Without a doubt, there's some kind of entity moving it, because there's nothing else would move it in that exact same spot every time, like as far as a physical explanation. After that, I'm sorry?
I said absolutely.
Yeah, so after that, when I started opening up more in my 20s and actually started working with spirits, nothing like physical stuff really happened, because when they come, I would pay attention to them, so they didn't have to do any, extravagant, things to try to get my attention. So a lot of times it was just getting like visions and things like that abruptly. That's when it kind of can really hit you sometimes, is you're just kind of driving down and you just happen to pass something, and you just kind of like get those visions like a ton of bricks, and those can be hard to control sometimes. So that's what I say I mostly get now, because I do allow myself to be a channel, that I just kind of get these visions and like things like that more commonly. As far as like physical, like, physical stuff happening, it doesn't really happen to me that often. Usually when that happens, it's usually because you're ignoring them, and then they kind of have to step it up a notch to get your attention.
Have you ever had any negative experiences?
Yeah, I have a couple situations that happened with my oldest child, actually, when he was a baby. So kids, it's pretty common knowledge for, in the paranormal world, that kids are very sensitive to that kind of stuff, right? They haven't been taught that it's not true
Yeah.
yet, so they are very sensitive. And there was a few entities slash spirits that they used to taunt him. So they used to wake him up in the middle of the night. Oh yeah, like it was bad. Like he would wake up screeching in the middle of the night. And it took me a while to kind of like get rid of it, right? To clear out that entity. So there was a few times, because he was so sensitive as well, more than normal children. Like he was very open when he was young. He had a few bad entities that used to come and taunt him, and so that's obviously a very negative experience. On the other side, as far as myself personally, the negative experiences just goes with seeing horrific things that they show you. Um,
Mm.
it can be really hard in the beginning, especially if you're not used to seeing that stuff and whatever. Like I've been a horror movie fanatic my whole life, so I mean, some of that stuff does, it doesn't really bother me. A lot of it doesn't, but a lot of times it just goes with the emotion. So I mean, seeing something traumatic happen in a movie is one thing, but seeing something traumatic happen and also feeling the emotion that is attached to it, that can be quite scary and negative. And especially if you're having a hard time to clear it or like get rid of it, it can be hard. It can be hard to have to stay in that emotion with that spirit for an extended period of time.
I've had a few, like, I wouldn't say aggressive or negative experiences, but sometimes I've woken up in the morning and I've already seen something happen.
Hmm.
Like I used to go to bed, and then in the morning I'll turn on BBC News or I'll turn on the news, and I would have already known that that event would have happened.
Yeah, that's a lot of people can do that, and it kind of is a premonition. That's really the only word really that we can kind of use. It's not a full premonition of days in advance, and you can stop it or anything
Yeah,
dramatic like that. And what that is it's actually the energies that are kind of floating around, especially if it's something that happens like in your hometown or like in your kind of closer vicinity. That energy is dispersed, right? And so people can get connected to that energy. It's also funny that you say you feel it in the morning, because that kind of twilight zone, that kind of like that line between consciousness and unconsciousness, that's where you pick up the most energies, because you're the most open to it, right? You're not fully conscious, so your
yeah.
conscious brain is not taking over. And when you're fully asleep, I mean, you're asleep, um, but yeah, that fine line, that's where you definitely get the most connection. And that's one of the recommendations of like sleep journals, because when you actually dream, you're actually in that line. So sometimes you remember, sometimes you can't, but yeah, so connecting from the like feeling up and picking up on the energies that are happening around you is pretty common. And a lot of people go, I knew that was going to happen, or I knew that happened. It's pretty common. People just don't trust that actually is their intuition that's doing it. They think it's just a coincidence, but a lot of people do it.
I must admit, I've been a skeptic all my life, but it wasn't until a few years back when I started feeling like I was being followed,
Mm.
and it wasn't it wasn't as like negative energy that was following me. It was just noticeable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes, well, most entities slash spirits, they just want attention. You know what I mean? Like the limbo that some of them are stuck in is boring. So sometimes they just want attention. Another thing that can happen too is it's either people that are connected to you, whether it's like family, ancestors, and things like that. And sometimes they just want to be around and see what's going on. And especially when people feel, again, it's not negative, but they're just kind of like, I just feel good. Like I like it for some reason. Most of the time, if you kind of have that, like, I kind of like having that thing around. Usually it's an ancestor or a family member that's just kind of trying to give you comfort, which is common as well. But yeah, most of the time, if you're being bugged by an entity that doesn't feel negative or threatening, usually they just want attention. They're bored. They just want attention.
The worst experience our family has probably had is at my grand's house. She used to live in a small house. She had lived there most of her adult life, and on the top step there used to be, well, we all seen it. We could all see it apart from my gran, and it used
Mm-hmm.
to be a figure sat on the top step, just a dark figure reading a book. And that house, for some reason, none of us could sit comfortably in that house.
Mm-hmm. Um, so your grand's house, did somebody own it beforehand? Like it was an old, like, or was she the only
I think
owner?
only one previous owner.
Okay, it could be. So if the previous owner is the one who like built it slash like whatever, they might be attached to that house, which is common, um, especially in really older homes where those people worked hard to build that house, right? And it's their house. Like they have that
Hmm.
feeling of this is my house. So that is pretty common to have. Usually it's an older owner. It's the previous owner going, this is my house, and they kind of get stuck to it. When we think of like movies, for example, an anti like spirits are stuck in the house, like they were murdered there or something traumatic happened and they're attached to it. That does happen, but actually not as often as movies and stuff like that portray it. Usually it's previous owners or previous people who have lived in that house because they own it. It's my house, right? That's their feeling. Um, so yeah, that's actually pretty common. So the reason you have that feeling of I'm not comfortable here is because that entity is protecting the energy of, well, you're not welcome here. This is my house, you know,
Yeah,
and they kind of give you that uneasy feeling. But those ones are also the easiest to kind of convince to go, um, with, and a lot of times it's just talking to them. It can be that easy. It's not as dramatic as some of, movies and all that kind of stuff show it. Getting rid of an entity is actually easier than it looks. A lot of times you just talk to them and go, hey, I recognize that you're here. Like give them presents. I recognize that you're here, but it's not your house anymore. It's time to go on. And a lot of times that'll do the trick.
I must admit that I have, even in this house that I'm in now, I've been sat at like 12 o'clock at night and I felt someone watching me. I've always gone if someone's there, but I can't bring myself to finish the sentence
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And
because I'm
and you
like,
don't have to
I
you don't have to bring them in.
because I want to know that they're there, but I also don't want to reply.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it does. It's scary. Don't get me wrong. It's easy for me to say now of like, it's no big deal, but that's after years and years of practice. It is scary. I will admit to, you know, not only cross that line of asking them, but because if once you do that, then you're actually changing your mindset of there actually is somebody else here, right? You're changing your mindset of this is potentially real, right? And that can be hard to change our minds to allow ourselves to believe and actually go crap, this can be real.
this is a very vague question, but someone's asked me to ask, can ghosts actually physically harm you?
Yes. But usually you ask for it. So normal people with like with your experiences, for example, they're around, but you're not really, not really interacting with them or anything like that. They're not going to harm you. Even with ones that are coming with malicious intent, like the ones that just feel scary and you just don't like it and you
Yeah.
feel off, they also can't really hurt you. You have to allow them in to your space for them to be able to do that. I've been hurt once. I learned that lesson the first time, and it was my own fault because I was connected to this entity. So I was interacting with them, and they were telling me to back off. Right? They were telling me to back off, don't bother, whatever. And my ego got ahead of me and went, no, I can do it. Like, I can do it. It's not, nothing bad is going to happen. And I did get physically hurt. Now, it was just like a prick on my finger. So like it did bleed, but it was like not, I didn't like get really, really injured. But it was a warning and I backed off obviously after that. So it can happen, but it's usually you are asking for it when it does happen.
Do you believe having a house blessed actually helps? Because I've heard some people say it angers the entities and spirits more.
No, so blessed is a bit of a vague word. We typically use the term like cleansing. So I think what you're thinking of is like when a house is blessed, it's like they're clearing out everything, right? Everything is cleaning it clean. And that can anger some of them, especially if there's ones that are attached to the house that don't bother you and they're just kind of hanging out. That can make them mad. So going at more of like a cleansing is you're putting in the intent of getting rid of the negative and ignoring everything else. You know what I mean? So you're putting in the intent of anything negative or ill will is going to be cleansed out of my house. So the ones that are going, well, I don't really, I'm not doing anything bad, so that doesn't apply to me. So they just continue to hang out. And it also allows, especially for someone like me who is more open, it allows those that don't have will ill and, just want to communicate to come into that presence as well, or into that space.
Another question that I've been kind of asked by friends to ask is, does every spirit have unfinished business, or can they choose to stay in limbo?
They can choose. Yeah, they can choose. And usually it's the angry ones that have unfinished business, and that's why they're angry, right? So it's actually a pretty small portion that actually have the unfinished business, angry, trying to do something kind of thing. The rest choose to, and they choose to for many different reasons. Some just don't want to move on. They had a good life here, they had a good life, and they enjoyed what they were and where they were and all that kind of stuff. So they don't want to leave. They want to stay. Others have stayed to watch over family, to watch over their descendants and things like that. So that's probably one of the more common ones, the more common reasons. But yeah, they choose to be here, and they also choose to when they want to go as well.
Another weird question is, one of my friends recently moved, or not recently moved into a house. A few years ago, they moved into a house, and they believed that there was something in that house because it would always walk across the stair landing. But one day, they had builders in, and they blocked up one of the doorways. And since they've blocked up that doorway, the spirit has continued walking the same way, but it seems to be more angry.
Yeah, because it can't go where it wants to go, by the sounds of it.
I that.
Yeah, yeah, it can't go. Yeah, because it has, for whatever reason, that's their path, and that's wherever they're trying to go. And because they can't go, they're just constantly trying, because in their mind they're going, this is the way to go here, right? So they're just going to keep going until, because they can't get there. So yeah.
This is like, this may come offensive, but do spells actually work?
Yes and no. Like anything, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, a lot of it has to do with how you do the spells. Now, and this is probably another misconception, and it can be a little, especially in education for beginner witches and stuff, it's very, oh, it's amazing, and it doesn't matter what you do, it's going to work. That's not true. And I mean, a jar with a crystal inside of it, those physical items aren't going to do anything. They're just, it's glass and it's a crystal. But a lot of time, what it is, it's what you are intending into that spell or whatever, or ritual or whatever you're trying to do, and how you act upon it. And that's the part that a lot of people forget in, witch community, is they kind of forget to tell that part. Is, so if I make a spell for money, for example, which is one of the most common things we're asked, for money, I can make a nice candle and all the herbs and oils and all this kind of stuff. But if I just sit it on my table and don't actually change anything in my life to draw more money, then no, it's not going to work. But if I, for example, I have a new one that I just started up, my money candle, and I light it once a day. And when I light it, I meditate for a moment on it, and that's when it goes, oh, I forgot I have to update this on my website. Oh, I forgot I have to, do this. So it kind of opens up my mind of how to open up those money pathways. But then when I'm done that meditation, I need to go do it, So it's just allowing me to see the pathways to get what I want to achieve. It's going to show you how to do it, how to get what you want, but you still have to go do it, right? You still have to go do the actions and put it into practice. So it is double-sided. Yes, they work, but some don't work. A lot of it is how you actually perform that spell and carry it through into practice.
Another question is, can anyone become a witch?
Yes. I know this is a bit of a debate on some social medias lately, but yes, anyone can become a witch. The general term of a witch. There's obviously closed practices and certain things that are associated with different cultures. So obviously you want to be sensitive to not appropriate that and use it in a negative connotation and all that kind of stuff. But the general term of witch, yes, everyone can be one. Especially, and a lot of it comes down to Caucasian people. I'm just going to say it. That's where it always comes down to, is Caucasian people. So, hi Caucasians. All of us were made or have some type of descendants in Europe. That's where we all kind of descend from. And in all of Europe, there was some type of paganism in some form or another. If you strip down the basics of paganism, it will fit in all of the ancient cultures in all of that area, in all of Europe, in the different areas. Yeah, they performed them or did different rituals and things like that, a little bit different in different areas. But if you strip it down to its roots, it's pretty much the same throughout. Do some of them correlate with other cultures that also existed during that time? Yes. The reason is that's all they had back then. You know what I mean? They had to live off the land. That's all they had. So yeah, it does. There are connections and similarities throughout. But stripping it down into basic paganism, yes, everybody is descended from there at some point or another. Moving into more modern witchcraft. Sorry.
No, continue.
Oh, so I'm just going to mention, so like moving into more modern witchcraft of, spells and crystals and all that kind of stuff, it's all very general. And a lot of it we're just kind of coming up with by like sharing information with each other. Because when you think of like, so my descendants are English and Irish, you couldn't find amethyst crystals or quartz crystals in those areas way back then. So it's not necessarily traditional for my ancestors to, you know, do that. So a lot of it is kind of blending and taking from different areas and putting them together. But the majority of the stuff that you see that is just labeled like Wicca or witchcraft is just general stuff. It doesn't descend from one specific culture or religion or practice than another. So yes, everyone can be a witch. Just be careful of what you're practicing, making sure it's not a closed practice. But on social media, it's gonna, if you do anything, you know, remotely, that they'll let you know right away.
Another thing is, some people believe that all witchcraft is bad and shouldn't be practiced at all.
Yeah, so that's a common theme. It is, and we hear it all the time. And one of the reasons is history is why. So back when Christianity was starting to kind of take over and flourish, anything that was practiced in like a paganism style was outcast, people were killed, all that kind of stuff, right? And so it was preached as it was negative, right? They were bringing in evil by doing these different things and stuff like that. So there was a rejection, there was a type of rejection of Christianity at that time, and went, okay, and they were radicals of their time, because they went, well, if I'm evil, then let's be evil, right? I'm going to be the most evil that you can conceive. So that divide of, you know, good and bad, that's how it kind of started, and that it just carried on through history, through one form of another. And even in modern times, where we don't have radical witches, you know, burning down churches or anything like that anymore, that preconceived notion that these people are on one side and those people are on the other side of good and evil still exists in, you know, the back of our minds. And a lot of times it's just a miseducation, or just people just not being informed. A lot of times when I experience people going, well, I thought you're a devil worshiper or that's evil, a lot of times it's just a lack of education or awareness of what witchcraft actually is.
See, a lot of my friends find it weird, but where I grew up, there was a church on top of a hill. I can send you the links if you want. It's known by the locals as a burnt down church. There were 3 churches built on that land, and each church was burnt down. And the 3rd church was burnt down, and people just blamed it on devil worshippers and stuff like that. They believed that kids were practicing witchcraft up there, and it was a thatch roof, and it just went up. But I find this sounds weird to all my friends, but my mum goes up there. If she goes anywhere near it, the next day she will be bedridden. She will be ill. She'll have the flu. She'll just become ill. But when I go up there, I find it peaceful.
Yeah, so a lot of times when people have different experiences like that, sometimes it's a preconceived notion. So they go up thinking like oh, it's a negative area and it's a negative space. So that's exactly what you're going to tap into. Because all areas have negative and positive. There's no such thing as an only positive area and only negative area. It's all a mix, right? Especially geographical locations, because so much time has passed in the world, so many things have happened on that land, that it's a mix, right? A mix of experiences layered on top of each other. Now, if you go with a preconceived notion that you're going to have a negative experience, then you're going to have a negative experience. And same on the flip side. If you think it's a good area and you're like, I'm going to tap in, there's going to be lots of good, feelings here and whatever, then you're going to tap into it. People choose on which one they tap into. And I see that a lot with skeptics, because they're like, I knew it. I knew that this was fake and it was negative and I'm going to have a negative experience. And I'm like, well, if you came in with that expectation, that's why you're having it. You know, that's why you're having that negative experience. Yeah.
So I just had a reminder come up that we've got 6 minutes and 35 seconds left. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say?
So my kind of like final thoughts is a lot of times it just comes down to education. If you're not sure, there's lots of information online. There's always people around. Like, I'm super open on Instagram for questions. I answer all questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. And that's what changes people's mindsets and decreases the stigma and kind of gets us past that stage of the stigmatization and the negative connotations around witchcraft. So always ask questions and be open-minded. That's number one, is be open-minded. When you ask a question, don't assume what the answer is. Be open-minded and move forward on your mindset of it.
Well, thank you for joining me. I will put all your links in the description, along with a little message to say thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
I will also be tweeting it on Twitter, and I will be putting it available on Spotify and Instagram.
Perfect.
So thank you for joining.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.